Good afternoon and welcome to today's press conference. We have with us Minister Jean-Yves Duclos of Public Services and Procurement and Minister Anita Anand, President of the Treasury Board, who I believe have some remarks to share with us, and then we will turn the floor open to questions. À vous.
Merci et bonjour à tous et à toutes. Thank you for joining us today. Des allégations récentes concernant la fourniture de services professionnels ont révélé des comportements inacceptables de la part de certains fournisseurs. Avec raison, les gens qui nous écoutent ont des questions et des inquiétudes quant à la façon dont leur argent est dépensé pour des projets et des programmes gouvernementaux. Nous prenons évidemment ces allégations au sérieux. Le gouvernement canadien doit continuer de protéger l'intégrité de ses processus d'approvisionnement. Heureusement, des mesures ont déjà été mises en place afin d'améliorer les processus d'approvisionnement. Parmi celles-ci figurent des mesures nouvelles et renforcées destinées à 1. Exiger une transparence totale de la part des fournisseurs en ce qui concerne leurs prix et leur recours à des sous-traitants. 2. Améliorer les exigences en matière d'évaluation afin de s'assurer que toutes les ressources des entrepreneurs et des sous-traitants soient dûment qualifiés pour effectuer le travail demandé. 3. Améliorer la documentation lors de l'attribution des contrats et des autorisations de tâches. 4. Clarifier les exigences de travail et les activités à réaliser. Et 5. S'assurer que les services sont effectivement fournis par les ressources proposées. Par ailleurs, mon ministère effectue un travail proactif pour prévenir la fraude dans les processus d'approvisionnement et cherche activement les cas de facturation frauduleuse potentiels. Après avoir reçu du financement dans le cadre du budget 2018 pour augmenter les ressources destinées à détecter la fraude au sein du système d'approvisionnement et la transition ultérieure et rapide vers les achats électroniques, mon ministère a détecté plusieurs cas de facturation frauduleuse mis en œuvre par des sous-traitants travaillant sur des contrats de services professionnels fédéraux entre 2018 et 2022. SPAC a rapidement pris des mesures pour révoquer ou suspendre les codes de sécurité des sous-traitants en question et 3 cas ont été récemment confiés à la GRC. Mon ministère prend également des mesures pour récupérer ces sommes illégitimes facturées au gouvernement canadien qui s'élèvent dans ce cas à environ 5 millions de dollars. Let me be clear. These fraudulent billing cases are unacceptable. Rules are in place to ensure that taxpayer dollars are protected, and systems must be also in place to make sure that those rules are being followed. Fraud undermines our ability to ensure value for money on behalf of Canadians, and the departments will continue to proactively detect and investigate all suspicions of fraud. Today, we're also moving forward with a new tool to enhance the integrity of federal procurement. Since 2015, the integrity regime has held suppliers accountable for wrongdoing. This being said, under the current regime, PSPC cannot take action against a supplier accused of serious offenses such as fraud or human trafficking, violations of the Code of Conduct for Procurement, or convictions under federal environmental laws. Moreover, the current regime does not allow measures to be taken against a supplier debarred by another jurisdiction, such as a province or the United States. More robust tools are therefore needed to address the gaps in the current regime and mitigate risk of misconduct and fraud. That is why we are announcing the establishment of a new Office of Supplier Integrity and Compliance, which will replace the existing integrity regime once it comes into effect in May. That new office will allow the government to better respond to wrongdoing and further safeguard the integrity of federal procurements. On that front, we are also introducing measures to better enable my department to take quick action against suppliers of concern. That includes broadening the scope of offenses and triggers that can lead to debarment or suspension, including offenses under the Criminal Code, such as fraud and corruption, under the Financial Administration Act, such as offering and accepting bribes, and the Canada Elections Act, such as illegal political financing. Offenses related to forced labor human trafficking, labor rights, and environmental protections will also be grounds for suspension or debarment. It will also allow my department to take action against a supplier that has been debarred by another jurisdiction, such as a province or a close trading partner. These are only a few examples of much-needed enhancements we are bringing to the table. The changes we are making now will further facilitate heightened security and scrutiny of suppliers, promote responsible corporate governance, and better equip Canada to address risk within the public procurement sector. PSPC is now engaging with industry stakeholders to ensure they understand these program changes before the new policy comes into effect. Maintenant, je vais passer la parole à ma collègue et amie, la ministre Anand.
Merci beaucoup, Jean-Yves. Recent reports regarding government contracting, as well as the actions of some individuals, are very concerning. As the Auditor General has confirmed, there are rules in place to ensure sound procurement and management processes across government. But some of these rules were broken, and as I said, it's very concerning and unacceptable. Today, I am announcing a series of actions that the Treasury Board of Canada Secretariat will take to strengthen our oversight of departmental practices to support effective and streamlined management across government. Pour garantir un respect accru de nos politiques, le Conseil du Trésor prendra les mesures suivantes. First, I'm going to introduce a new risk and compliance mechanism which will take into account government-wide trends, risks, and individual departmental performance and take immediate corrective actions where necessary. En utilisant ce processus, le CST supervisera de manière plus active les pratiques de gestion à l'échelle du gouvernement et les résultats afin de prévenir et de détecter les performances insuffisantes et l'utilisation inappropriée de fonds publics. This process is going to be informed by several measures, including and most importantly a horizontal audit that the Comptroller General will undertake beginning next month across a number of departments to assess things like governance, decision-making, and controls associated with professional services contracts, including in the area of IT. This is an extremely important audit, and it goes to the heart of what we need to continue to do comprehensively across government. You will recall in the fall that I released a manager's guide on procuring professional services. And at that time, I said that this manager's guide is evergreen. What that means is that it is subject to change as new information comes to light. The purpose of that guide was and continues to be to reduce reliance on third-party contracting. And so the second thing that I would like to announce today is an update to that manager's guide. And that is going to include principles to further reinforce managers' responsibilities vis-a-vis third-party contracts. So what's it going to further require? Examining existing human resources and staffing strategies prior to deciding to procure professional services, providing a clear statement of work and fair evaluation criteria by which a supplier is selected. Exercising due diligence, like making sure there is no conflict of interest to maintain the integrity of the procurement, and monitoring and documenting the delivery of service and ensuring that obligations under the contract are being met, including by subcontractors, prior to issuing payment. These are updates that we are making to the manager's guide in procuring professional services. We have new information that has come to light through the Auditor General's report and the Procurement Ombudsman's report which we take extremely seriously, and in order to take action as quickly as possible, I am releasing a revised update of that manager's guide today. Pour renforcer davantage l'utilisation du guide dans les 2 prochains mois, nous imposerons la responsabilité des gestionnaires lors de l'acquisition de services professionnels en intégrant certains éléments du guide dans les procédures obligatoires. In other words, there will be aspects of the guide that become mandatory for managers in the procurement of professional services. And then third, I have said and commit today to reviewing the directive on conflict of interest to ensure that the requirements are clear and effective, particularly as they relate to employees who engage in outside employment. Additionally, we will review guidance provided to deputy heads who are responsible for enforcing and implementing the guide to support the effective exercise of their authorities and responsibilities under this directive. Demain, nous examinerons l'éducation de la formation obligatoire pour les employés et les gestionnaires, ainsi que la surveillance supplémentaire de la directive par mon ministère qui pourrait être nécessaire. Par exemple, nous étudierons s'il est nécessaire de renforcer les conséquences de non-conformité de la directive. To close, in this announcement, we are being responsive and we aim to be continually transparent. We will make the results of the audits public, and we will improve the Open Government portal in order to make it more user-friendly, more clear, and more accurate for persons inside and outside government. Canadians deserve to know how their hard-earned tax dollars are being spent, and that they are being spent wisely on priorities that matter to them. And most importantly, maintaining public confidence in democratic institutions is top of mind for me and for our government, especially at this moment in time. Merci beaucoup. Nous pouvons recevoir vos questions maintenant.
Okay, we will move to questions in the room first. We do have some colleagues online. We'll see how much time we have. It'll be one question, one follow-up as per usual. We'll begin with Christy Kirkup from the Globe and Mail.
Hi, good afternoon. Can we just back up the bus a little bit here? There have been 3 subcontractors who are alleged to have engaged in fraudulent activity with millions of government dollars that has been referred now to the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. On what day was that matter referred to the RCMP, and how concerned are you that this could be a widespread problem regarding fraudulent activity with respect to taxpayer money?
Good, and thank you. So let me try to address the different aspects of your questions. First, when that was referred to the RCMP, it was referred to over time and in steps to the RCMP over the last few weeks. So there have been a number of exchanges between my department and the RCMP as more information was gathered and as more information was sought on the part of the RCMP. The second, this is obviously a troubling outcome, something that we would never want to see. The good news, if there is a good news here, is that it shows that the investments in what we call electronic procurement, in data gathering and data analytics over the last few years are starting to work really well. So when data is stored in a format which can be used for in artificial intelligence tools, it's not artificial intelligence, but it's data analytics that is able to deliver good outcomes, if it's able to build on data that is usable by these techniques, then we can come up with outcomes of this type. And that is a clear signal to others that may be tempted to proceed to fraudulent billing, as has been shown in those three cases. So our expertise within the government is increasingly strong, and that again sends a strong signal to anyone who would like to be fraudulently billing the federal government to the extent of several $1 million in that particular case. So yes, it is troubling and unacceptable. At the same time, it shows that with the investments we've made over the last few years in better handling, collecting, storing, and using of data, we can lead to these particular outcomes.
And just as a follow-up, I know that the government has made it clear that the three subcontractors that were referred to the RCMP were not related to the ArriveCan app. But I would like to ask you, we saw ArriveCan contractor David Yao testify at a parliamentary committee yesterday, and it was confirmed that on the same day that he got a government contract, he also began at the Department of National Defense as a public servant, and he said there's no conflict of interest in that case. I'm wondering, ministers, what is your reaction to that?
Well, today's and there will be obviously follow-up on that information. There are several operations going on. The work of the parliamentary committees is very important. We know there are various independent assessors within the federal government that are going to keep looking at those alleged statements. This being said, if I may focus on today's announcement, because this is obviously not a substitute for the other work that needs to be done, but it's a complement to what we are seeing when it comes to dealing with fraud in some cases. In many cases, as the Auditor General mentioned, it's just a matter of storing and keeping and sharing adequate information. It's a matter of adequate record keeping, which was found to be quite deficient obviously in a very constrained and restricted manner within the CBSA, but still, it tells us that we by prudence need to be looking at other places. Until now, my department, PSPC, hasn't found that, as you were asking, this is a generalized feature of our procurement process, but by prudence, we need to make sure of that, and that's why the office that we are announcing today is going to help do that even better in the next few months and years in two different ways, if I can add and conclude with that. The first way is by enlarging the type of activities that we can consider when it comes to suspending or debarring contractors. So we are significantly increasing the scope of these activities by including, for instance, municipal corruption, the financing of terrorism, contraventions to various laws, environmental and electoral laws, and many other things that will enable the new office to look more broadly than it can do now. And the second part is by using information, including judicial outcomes that other jurisdictions may be able to provide and that we should be able to use in addressing those possible issues within Canada.
And I might add that I was not the Minister of National Defense at the time this person was employed, but my understanding is that he did not make the disclosure relating to any conflict of interest at the time of contracting, and that is an explicit requirement under the directive on conflict of interest. That disclosure must be made, and to date, D&D has found no evidence that he has submitted the disclosure that he mentioned he did. Again, he's no longer employed at the Department of National Defense, and internal investigations on this matter are taking place. My point today, in terms of indicating a revising of the Directive on Conflict of Interest, is to reinforce the point that disclosures of conflict of interest must be made at the time of contracting, and that deputy heads must maintain that ongoing obligation to ensure that the employee is disclosing all conflicts throughout the term of their employment, regardless of the department in which they are in.
Bonjour, Monsieur, Madame la Ministre. On a un portrait du 5 millions de dollars et des 3 sous-contractants qui est plutôt vague. Je comprends que vous ne pouvez pas me donner tous les détails, mais expliquez-nous un peu, puis expliquez aux gens à la maison qui se demandent comment cette double ou triple ou quadruple facturation s'est produite.
Bien, elle s'est produite parce que, jusqu'à récemment, la plupart des informations en matière d'approvisionnement étaient entreposées.
Je vous interromps tout de suite parce qu'au-delà du principe en général, dans ce cas-ci, qu'est-ce qui s'est passé qui a soulevé votre suspicion?
Bon, on ne peut pas évidemment être trop précis parce que tout ça est sous enquête là, par la GRC et il faut respecter l'indépendance de tout ça et on veut clairement éviter de contaminer ce travail par des informations partielles ou incomplètes que ce genre d'environnement pourrait générer. Par contre, la question est bonne et la réponse est que ceci a été possible et probablement que c'était le cas au cours des dernières années, des dernières décennies, dans un environnement où les informations étaient entreposées en format papier, dans des dossiers séparés, dans des ministères individuels. Alors, c'était difficile pour une équipe qui s'occupe, ou des équipes qui s'occupent de la surfacturation ou de la facturation frauduleuse, d'arriver au genre de résultats qu'on voit aujourd'hui. Mais la bonne nouvelle, c'est que les technologies de l'information nous permettent maintenant de faire ce travail, particulièrement depuis la COVID-19. La COVID-19 également a mené à vraiment de toutes sortes de drames et d'impacts négatifs pour notre société. Mais une des choses que ça a permis de faire, c'est de mettre en place rapidement et beaucoup plus rapidement des processus de numérisation et d'échange électronique avec, entre autres, les fournisseurs. Donc, 98% maintenant des contrats du gouvernement canadien se font de manière électronique, ce qui permet d'échanger ces informations électroniques de manière très efficace entre les ministères et d'arriver à ce genre de constat que l'on voit aujourd'hui. Donc ça, c'est le tout début. Ce sont 3 cas, mais on s'attend à ce qu'il y en ait prochainement davantage et qu'il y en aura peut-être encore davantage. Mais en même temps, le signal est clair. Ceux qui seraient tentés en 2024 de soumettre des factures frauduleuses au gouvernement canadien doivent se méfier, parce que maintenant, on est capable de faire des choses qu'on ne pouvait pas faire il y a quelques mois à peine.
Une chose qui ne nécessite pas nécessairement une technologie super avancée, c'est de vérifier que le travail a bien été fait avant de payer la facture. Ça fait partie des choses que vous voulez changer. Comment se fait-il qu'on payait des factures sans vérifier si le travail était fait?
Bon, dans la très grande majorité des cas, ce travail a été fait correctement. La pandémie a amené et a forcé les fonctionnaires à agir d'une manière qui aurait été impensable dans un contexte normal. On leur a demandé d'agir de manière rapide et efficace. Il fallait protéger des dizaines de milliers de vies, des centaines, des millions d'emplois, en fait, et des milliards de dollars. Donc, ils ont procédé malgré les règles, et quand je dis « ils », ce sont pour l'instant, de plus en plus, on est sûr, c'est un nombre assez limité de fonctionnaires, d'une manière qui ne respectait pas les normes en matière de recueil d'informations, de s'assurer que, comme vous l'avez dit, les fonds étaient utilisés aux bons usages, que les paiements étaient effectués.
Quelque chose de simple, là. Le travail a-t-il été fait? Oui, on paie la facture. On ne faisait même pas ça selon vos propres dires. Comment ça se fait? Bien,
c'est ce que la vérificatrice générale a conclu. Elle a même dit qu'en raison de l'imprécision des données disponibles, il lui était difficile de mettre un montant clair sur le coût d'avoir développé l'application. Donc, c'est un exemple évident là, de ce que vous dites, c'est que cette information n'a pas été suffisamment bien recueillie et certainement pas bien entreposée, puisqu'on ne peut pas la retrouver.
Mike Lecouture.
Ministers, thank you for taking our questions. I just wanted to pick up on something that Christian was mentioning. I think Canadians at home want to properly understand these 3 cases. And without going into any detail that would hamper or ruin any investigation, can you just give us an idea of maybe one example? Was somebody double, triple, quadruple billing multiple departments? And if so, which departments? How many departments? By one person? How deep did this go?
What it has, the information that we have, we being the department, obviously, has gathered over the recent weeks and months, indicate that this has impacted dozens of departments. The overbilling, therefore, was made in a manner that took advantage of the fact that until recently, when everything was done on paper, until recently it was difficult for departments to coordinate and to share that information. So given the recent fast and strong advances in the electronic procurement system, we are now able to collect that information across the government and find out whether there are instances of fraudulent billing. So that's how it happened. As I was saying in French a moment ago, that's a clear warning to anyone who would like to do such things in 2024, because in 2024, about 98% of procurement contracts are now come with electronic data and information. So it's a lot easier, faster, and efficient for the government to go after those that would be tempted with fraudulent billing.
Just as my follow-up, I mean, this is to both of you, because Minister Anand, you were also the Minister of Procurement. So you released a manager's guide, and now you're updating it. You spoke about how things were supposed to ensure that there were no conflicts of interest or double billing. How shocked are both of you at the state of Canada's procurement process right now?
You go ahead.
Well, Canada awards about $34 billion of procurement activities every year. It's the biggest procurer of goods and services across the country. It serves the needs of tens of millions of Canadians. So it obviously plays an essential role in the lives, including the safety of Canadians. We need to do better when it comes to ensuring the integrity and the reputation of our procurement system. That's why today's announcement is one more thing that we are doing. What we are announcing today is all of those strengthened rules, which President Anand has also highlighted in her own remarks. All of those strengthened rules around documentation, record keeping, transparency. That those rules were in effect during COVID-19, but they were not followed by a minor but upsetting number of public servants at CBSA. The second thing is the fact that with the electronic procurement data that we have gathered, the data analytics expertise that the government is developing within PSPC and other departments as well, we are now able to identify cases of fraudulent billing, and we'll be going after them. And the third thing is the Office of Supplier Integrity and Compliance, which, as we said earlier, is going to, by prudence, extend significantly beyond the current areas in which it can right now operate. So that might or might not be needed in the future, but having an expanded set of activities, various violations, contraventions, public disrepute activities, by expanding those set of activities which the department can investigate with the support of other jurisdictions, that is going to make our procurement process more safe and more effective in the future.
And I'll just add a few things, actually. When I was at Procurement and Jean-Yves was at Treasury Board, I was responsible for the procurement of vaccines, rapid tests, and PPE. And that was a time when we were in a global competitive race for all of those items. And I repeatedly gathered my officials together in the department and said, we need to act quickly, we need to diversify our supply chains, and we need to ensure integrity of contracts. That means before we finalize contracts, we need to ensure that suppliers are reputable and we are not abusing taxpayer dollars. I said that repeatedly to my department. The Auditor General did an examination of our vaccine procurements. She did not find these types of issues. And I want to stand by the importance of integrity in contracting. And so what I'm doing here today with mon ami Jean-Yves Duclos is to emphasize that in the manager's guide now, we are going to be even more stringent about what we expect deputy heads and managers to enforce before entering into contracts with third parties. And in particular, before issuing payment, they will need to monitor and document the delivery of services. They will need to ensure that there's a clear statement of work and fair evaluation criteria. They will need explicitly to exercise due diligence to make sure that there are no conflicts of interest and to make sure that they're maintaining the integrity of a procurement. So exactly the types of things I said to my officials during the procurement of vaccines is what I am ensuring is going to go into the manager's guide that has been issued today. The one thing that we have to make sure does not get left out is that there is the responsibility of deputy heads to ensure that there is adherence to the manager's guide. And we are therefore embedding certain aspects of the guide into the mandatory procedures and responsibilities of deputy heads so that it is not just a guide in those respects. And furthermore, what we need to ensure is not only the accountability of the public service employee who is entering into that contract, but the responsibility and accountability of the deputy heads and managers who are overseeing those individuals. As ministers, we do not hire public service employees. We entrust that role to the deputy heads and managers. Therefore, there needs to be, by them, a continual oversight mechanism to ensure the accountability of the framework and the adherence to the manager's guide on procuring third-party services. And so what I am doing in the Conflict of Interest Directive also is ensuring that manager accountability and oversight is part of the response from the Government of Canada. This is a very serious issue, and it deserves a very serious response prospectively, and that's exactly why we are here today.
We will move now to Mylène Crête.
Bonjour, Monsieur Duclos. J'aimerais savoir, juste une petite clarification pour être certaine, là, votre haute fonctionnaire là, nous a dit que les dossiers pour les 3 sous-contractants là, qui auraient frauduleusement facturé pour 5 millions de dollars de travail, que les dossiers avaient été fermés en 2022-2023. Vous nous dites que ça a été transféré à la GRC au cours des dernières semaines. Là. Je voudrais clarifier ce point-là.
Bon, je n'ai pas l'information exacte sur quand, parce que, évidemment, je ne me mêle pas des relations qui ont un lien avec la GRC et les poursuites judiciaires. Mais ce que je comprends, c'est que dans les derniers mois, exactement quand, il y a eu une série d'échanges. Ce n'est pas un échange, c'est plusieurs échanges, parce qu'évidemment, dès que le ministère croit qu'il y a matière à enquête de la part de la GRC, le ministère prend contact avec la GRC pour l'informer de manière préliminaire de ce qui pourrait s'en venir. La GRC revient et il y a une série d'échanges à plusieurs niveaux et à plusieurs vitesses pour que la GRC puisse enquêter sur ces cas. Donc, c'est normal que ça se passe comme ça parce que toute l'information n'est pas tout nécessairement disponible depuis le début et toute l'information pertinente dont la GRC peut avoir besoin n'est pas nécessairement connue dès le début par le ministère.
Et une double question pour vous deux. Premièrement, pour M. Duclos, ça va changer quoi exactement votre bureau de l'intégrité? Et pour Mme Anand, ça aurait changé quoi si M. David Yo avait déclaré son conflit d'intérêts?
Bon, premièrement, pour le bureau de l'intégrité et de la conformité des fournisseurs, ça va changer deux choses. Et la première chose, c'est que ça élargit considérablement les raisons pour lesquelles le bureau et le ministère pourraient vouloir faire des enquêtes et radier ou suspendre des contrats ou radier des fournisseurs. Des exemples rapides, la corruption municipale, du financement de terrorisme, du trafic humain, des contraventions à la loi électorale, des pots de vin, des contraventions aux lois provinciales sur les valeurs mobilières, sur des contraventions ou des violations du code d'éthique en matière d'approvisionnement, des contraventions aux lois environnementales, des actions qui pourraient mettre en danger la réputation du gouvernement canadien. Donc, ce sont tous des exemples qui ne sont pas présentement possibles pour que le ministère, dans le régime actuel, puisse entamer, poursuivre et parfois conclure des démarches qui mènent à la radiation ou la suspension de fournisseurs ou de contrats. La deuxième chose que ça fait aussi, c'est que ça nous permet de travailler beaucoup mieux avec d'autres juridictions qui, dans certains cas, sont en avance sur nous parce qu'elles ont plus d'informations sur nous, sur des violations à tout ce que je viens d'énumérer qu'elles auraient pu observer pour ces fournisseurs. Donc, ça donne des outils qui, autrement, ne seraient pas possibles, ne seraient pas disponibles pour le ministère. Le ministère ne serait contraint légalement de ne pas utiliser ces outils et donc les choses tarderaient trop. Alors, c'est évidemment par prudence qu'on fait ça parce qu'il y a peut-être des outils dont on n'aura peut-être pas besoin au cours des prochaines années. Mais si on a besoin de ces outils, ils vont être disponibles au bureau.
Et je voudrais ajouter quelque chose ici aussi. La divulgation est très importante. C'est pas une détail mineur. C'est la priorité pour les gestionnaires. Pourquoi? Parce que les employés doivent informer leurs gestionnaires de tout emploi et de toute activité extérieure qui pourrait donner lieu à un conflit d'intérêts réel ou perçu et demander son approbation avant de conclure une entente contractuelle avec le gouvernement du Canada. Donc, c'est une matière d'être honnête aussi, de fournir l'information nécessaire. Et aussi, peut-être je pourrais lire un moment une phrase importante de directive sur les conflits. La directive décrit les conséquences de la non-conformité. Toute personne employée dans la fonction publique fédérale qui ne s'est pas conformée aux exigences de la directive peut faire l'objet de mesures disciplinaires pouvant aller jusqu'à la cessation d'emploi. Donc, si il y a une gestionnaire qui a l'information à cause de la divulgation, on peut décider si on veut avoir cette personne comme fonctionnaire. Donc aussi peut-être si M. Yo avait déclaré, par exemple, qu'il y aurait eu des conséquences plutôt pour les échecs de conformité avec la directive sur les conflits d'intérêts, il n'avait pas déclaré son conflit d'intérêt. Et c'est pour ça que ça a pris plus de temps de le savoir. Aujourd'hui, c'est important de renforcer l'importance, les conséquences de ne faire pas la divulgation nécessaire sur les conflits d'intérêts ou les potentiels pour les conflits d'intérêts. Donc, la responsabilité est sur le fonctionnaire ou l'homme qui veut être fonctionnaire. Et donc, après ça, les gestionnaires peuvent faire la décision sur l'engagement?
Kate McKenna, CBC.
I understand that about 5 million Canadian dollars has been, until now, lost or stolen. I'm wondering if anyone inside the government is being held accountable for this in any way. Has anyone lost their job over this? What's happening internally?
Well, the internal investigation obviously is ongoing. Until now, there has not been any sign that this was due to mismanagement within the federal government, but by prudence, we obviously furthering that investigation. And that's why the RCMP is investigating on these 3 subcontractors. And that's what it is.
And from the government officials that this tip came in through a tip line. Were there internal mechanisms in place to catch this sort of thing? And if not, why not?
Well, that's a great question. I would answer it in 2 ways. The first is that the tip line has indeed been a useful tool and will continue to be a useful tool. But I say it will continue to be a useful tool, but this other tool, the e-procurement and the data analytics, are going to be significantly better, in a sense that we will need to rely less on tip lines, although tip lines will always be useful. Well, we need to rely less on those tip lines because a lot of the information that the government will keep accumulating over time will now be shareable with the office. So the tip line, in a world in which there is no numerical data to be shared, in which a world in which everything is siloed in each department, departments don't talk to each other because it's all paper-based. A tip line is one of the rare tools that we can then use to know where to invest investigation resources. That, again, will continue to be important, but the good news is that the data analytics and the data sharing opportunities will enable the government at a very good speed and with increased efficiency to look into these cases of fraudulent billing and activities. And as I said earlier, it's a warning to anyone that in 2024 the government is able to do things which it wasn't able to do just a few years ago.
So there were no internal mechanisms a few years ago to see if people were double billing?
Of course. There were also internal mechanisms, audits by many officials, including within my department, within Treasury Board, which has a significant role and responsibility to play in those things. Yes, there were loads of resources, and those resources will continue to be very useful. That don't misunderstand me. What I'm saying is that in addition to those existing and ongoing resources, we now have abilities which we didn't have just a few years ago.
We have about 5 more minutes left, so we'll go with Abigail Binman, Global.
Ministers, we've heard you reference the 3 cases that were referred to the RCMP, but we also heard from government officials about 5 to 10 more cases that they're looking into, and they didn't seem to have an idea of how many millions of dollars that involved, or even if it was just those 5 to 10 cases. Do either of you know how widespread this problem is, or how many millions of dollars it could encompass?
The officials have been both transparent and prudent, transparent in the way you just described, and prudent in a sense that they need to know more before they can be more specific. And I have confidence, and in fact I'm expecting my officials to be as transparent as they can be over time when the appropriate level of information is available, so that you can be briefed on the evolution of the investigations around these additional cases.
Okay, and the news release references some attempts to get some of this $5 million back. Can you say how confident you are that some of these taxpayer dollars may be recovered?
All efforts will be put into recovering those dollars. Again, the good news is we have a substantial level of information on the wrongdoing associated with these fraudulent billings. So, as I mentioned earlier, we are better equipped, not only in finding out about these cases, but in prosecuting them and recovering the fraudulent dollars that they should not have received.
And I'll just add that the department responsible for developing the contract as a general matter is responsible for recouping any lost funds, and lost funds will aim to be recouped in the interests of ensuring prudent management of taxpayer dollars.
Catherine Morrison, the Auto Citizen.
Hi, I know it was mentioned that there isn't a central repository, a place where there is information about all government contracts. And I know you mentioned that there in previous times there were, papers in different folders and everything. Is part of the work of this new office going to be to create, a portal or something so that you have more of an idea of how many contracts are in the government?
Well, that will indeed help support Minister Anand's own work in providing a portal of contractual information. There is already one, but as you know, it needs to be improved. In fact, it has already been improved, given some of the difficulties that journalists, including some of you in the room, have had over the last few months in gathering exact information on contractual activities. The departments have been able to proceed quickly with the revision of that portal under the responsibility of Minister Anand, and I am told that about 75% of the not incomplete, but the difficult information that difficult contractual sets of information that journalists had difficulty handling, about 75% of those cases have now been cleared and resolved, but there are another 25% that needs to be addressed. And you're correct. When that portal is even in stronger shape, when Treasury Board and my department work even better together, then the office that we're announcing today is going to be able to do an even better job.
And I'll just add, just building on the open government portal piece, that has been improved to introduce a single total value for contracts and their amendments. We've already eliminated close to 75% of instances where contracting information was published in a manner that created confusion. Going forward, because transparency is so crucial, we are going to publish additional information about contracts on this open data portal. And we're going to ensure that it's more user-friendly, the information is more clearly presented and more accurate so that it is overall more user-friendly. And I want to stress how important we think that portal is, not only for information on contracts for the Government of Canada, but for Canadians as a whole. And that is a commitment that I'm making today in terms of the disclosure of contractual information on the open data portal.
Catherine, just as a follow-up, and then I believe we'll be at the conclusion of today's event. Go ahead.
Okay, I know it's been mentioned a few times about how this new system will improve things, but I guess I'm just trying to understand, with a portal already in place, with previous integrity, resources, how did this happen? How does this continue to happen? You mentioned that there are other cases. Like, how did that happen?
Yeah, well, at the risk of making journalists feel jealous, the portal includes only a limited subset of the information that officials have. There's a lot more information that is confidential for all sorts of reasons and that the office can use. So the portal is good for the reasons that Minister Anand said, is to make sure that Canadians and journalists can do their job and Canadians can have access to transparent information. But there is a lot more information that the new office is going to use. And again, much of that information just a few years ago couldn't be used because it was just siloed and on paper and very difficult to share and to use across the departments. But now this is changing, and as we noted, it's leading to a greater ability to identify problematic, possibly fraudulent cases, and a better ability to prosecute those cases and to be and for those fraudulent dollars to be paid back to the federal government.
I want to put this in context, and I do not want to minimize the importance of the question. We procured hundreds of millions of vaccines, and we were the leader in the world on vaccine procurement. We procured 2.5 billion items of PPE, and we stood up Canadian industry. The Canadian government has 300,000 employees, and a large majority of the contracts at issue during the COVID-19 pandemic were reputable and occurred with integrity. On the contracts that are at issue in the Auditor General's report that emanated from CBSA, there are significant concerns. And we take the Auditor General's report extremely seriously, and we want to address those issues immediately. And so we are asking and answering that very question. And the way in which we're answering it is to say, not only are we going to stand up this new body at PSPC, but we are also going to ensure accountability in the contracting process by the managers and the public servants who are making decisions to execute these contracts. As a general matter, as a government, we would like to see a decrease in the reliance on third-party contractors. That's why I published the first iteration of the guide in the fall, and now I'm coming out with a second, even more detailed and stringent guide. That is why we have reduced almost $1 billion in reliance on third-party contracting. I've tabled those results in the supplementary estimates and the main estimates. But the work continues. This is also an opportunity for us to see how we can ensure greater accountability by managers and individuals in the public service, including deputy heads who oversee the contracting, who are responsible for enforcing the manager's guide and complying with the directive on conflict of interest. But as I said, this work continues, and we have seen through the Auditor General's report an unacceptable situation that we need to address, and that is exactly why we're here. Thank you.
Thank you for your time today. That brings to the end our press conference. Merci.
Thank you, everyone.